TicketsCAD ships 9 built-in ICS forms, the 213, the 214, the 202, and more. But every agency eventually runs into a form ICS never anticipated. This is how you build your own. In the next several minutes, a quick tour of the built-in forms and why they're not enough on their own, the two-tier permission model for who gets to author a custom type, building one field by field with the same numeric guardrails the server enforces, filling it out from the dispatch hub, printing it, archiving it, and the one design detail that keeps your saved form safe even after you edit the type later. This came from a real request on the project's GitHub tracker, issue number 69. An agency wanted a form the built-in 9 simply didn't cover, and asked whether TicketsCAD could support it without waiting on a code release. The answer was to build a parallel system, additive only, a new database table for custom types, one new nullable column linking a saved form to its type, and 0 changes to how any of the 9 existing forms already work. If something ever goes wrong with a custom type, the 213 and the 214 are completely unaffected. I'm logging in as an administrator on a throwaway account created just for this recording. This is the ICS Forms Hub. These 9 cards are the built-in forms: general message, activity log, incident objectives, radio communications plan, communications list, resource request message, medical plan, individual activity log, and demobilization checkout. Open any of them, here's the 213, and every field, every label, every print layout is hand-coded in PHP. That's exactly right for a form FEMA already standardized decades ago. Nobody should be editing the 213's field list. But that hand-coded design is also a wall. If your agency needs a form ICS never defined, the only way to add it used to be a code change and a release, out of reach for a volunteer organization without its own developer. Maybe it's a rehab check-in sheet for a rope rescue team. Maybe it's a CERT damage assessment card. Maybe it's a shelter intake form for a Red Cross partnership. None of those are ICS standard, and none of them are worth a code change just to add one field a single agency needs. Custom ICS form types let an administrator define a new form, its fields, its labels, its print layout, entirely from the browser. No code, no release, no waiting on a developer. And it never touches the 9 built-in forms' own code paths. This is a parallel, additive system sitting alongside them, not replacing anything. Authoring a form type is split into 2 permissions, on purpose. A superadmin can create an install-wide type that every organization on the system can use. An org admin can only create a type scoped to their own organization. It never leaks across org boundaries, and it's never visible to anyone outside that org. That split matters on a multi-agency install. A dispatch center hosting free volunteer organizations doesn't want one org's admin defining a form that silently shows up for the other 2, and that boundary is enforced on the server for every save and every read, not just hidden by which menu item you happen to see. This account is a super admin, so I'll show the install-wide path. The org-scoped path an org admin sees works identically. The same editor, the same field builder, it's simply narrower about who can see the result. If this install-wide versus org-scoped split sounds familiar, it should. The public incident board, shipped a few weeks earlier, uses the identical pattern: one permission for install-wide settings, a second, narrower permission for an org's own self-service slice. That earlier feature is exactly where this design got battle-tested. A security review of that earlier feature found a real gap. A generic admin check could accidentally let an org admin reach an install-wide only setting. Custom form types were built with that lesson already applied. The org scope check never falls back to a broader admin flag, so the same class of leak can't happen here. The authoring screen lives under Settings, ICS Forms. This lists every custom type on the install, active and archived, with a New Type button to start one. New Type opens the editor. Form title is what dispatchers see on the hub card. The slug is the form's permanent internal identifier. Once you save, changing it would orphan any forms already using it, so pick something short and stable. I'll call this one Rehab Check-In. The slug fills in on its own from the title, a short description, a badge color so it's easy to spot on the hub, and an icon. These are cosmetic, but they're what makes a dispatcher's eye find the right card fast during a real incident. The scope selector is the RBAC split made concrete. As a super admin, I can leave it install-wide, or pick a single organization to scope it to. An org admin still sees this selector, but it is locked to their own organization. They cannot reach the install-wide option, and that is enforced server-side, not just hidden in the UI. Now, the fields. Add field, and pick a type. A plain text field, subject name, for something a dispatcher types freely. A type can carry up to 40 of these simple fields, plenty for anything short of a novel. A number field, heart rate with a minimum and maximum. Anything outside that range gets rejected server-side when the form is saved, not just flagged in the browser, so a stray keystroke can't quietly save a heart rate of 900. A select field, rehab status with a fixed option list, entered, monitoring, released. Dispatchers pick from the list, they can't type something that doesn't match. A select can carry up to 50 options, which covers even a long jurisdiction-specific code list. A checkbox for a yes or no fact, cleared to return to duty. A section header doesn't collect any data at all, it just breaks the printed form into readable groups, here labeled vitals. And a table field for repeating rows, a vitals log with columns for time, pulse, temperature, and notes, so one person's rehab can be tracked across multiple checks on the same form. A table can carry up to 12 columns and up to 200 rows, and a type can define up to 3 separate tables, generous enough for a long incident without letting one form balloon out of control. Fields don't have to stay in the order they were added. These arrows move a field up or down the list. I'll pull the vitals header up so it introduces the vitals, related fields instead of trailing after them. And the trash icon on each row removes a field from the draft entirely, before you save. Nothing is committed until save is clicked, so it's safe to experiment with the layout. One more type, a textarea for freeform notes that run longer than a single line. Between text, number, select, checkbox, textarea, a section header, and a table, that's every shape of data an ICS-style form actually needs. One more option before saving, restrict to permission. Leave it blank, and anyone who can use ICS forms can fill this type out. Set it to a specific permission code, and only users holding that permission can see or start one, useful if a form carries something sensitive, like protected medical detail. Save, and there it is in the list, active, 7 fields, ready to use. Every create, every edit, and every archive of a type is written to the audit log, so there's a record of who defined this form and when. And that record survives even if the type is later archived or a field is renamed. The log entry references the change as it happened, not a live pointer that could drift out from under it. One quick validation check. If I start a second type that happens to land on the same slug, rehab check-in, and try to save it, the server refuses. A slug has to be unique within its scope, so 2 forms can never collide and silently overwrite each other's data. I'll cancel that draft. The type list still shows exactly 1 rehab check-in, untouched. Back on the ICS Forms hub, Rehab Check. In now sits right alongside the built-in forms. Same card layout, same new button, indistinguishable to a dispatcher except that we built it a few minutes ago without touching a line of code. Clicking New on that card opens the same field list in the same order, rendered as a real fillable form. The text box, the number box with its bounds, the drop-down, the checkbox, the vital section header, and the table. I'll fill it out the way a rehab officer would in the field, a name, a heart rate, a status, and 1 row in the log. Save, and it lands in the list of saved ICS forms exactly like a 213 or a 214 would. Same wastebasket protection, same audit trail, same permission checks on who can open it later. Delete one by mistake and it goes to the wastebasket first, recoverable, just like any other ICS form. There's no separate, weaker deletion path for a custom type, and it shows up in the same wastebasket list a dispatcher already knows how to use for everything else. Opening it back up proves the data actually persisted. Every value is exactly what was typed. Print works the same way it does on the built-in forms. A clean, labeled layout, the vital section header breaking up the page exactly where it was placed while authoring the type, and any restricted or confidential security label on the incident still redacts sensitive fields the same way it would on a 213. Every rule shown while building this type. A select needs at least 1 option, a table needs at least 1 column, a number field's minimum can't exceed its maximum, an unknown field type is rejected outright, is enforced a second time on the server when you save. A malformed request built by hand, bypassing the browser entirely, gets refused exactly the same way the editor's own form would refuse it. Here's the one design detail that matters more than it looks like it should. What happens to a form you already saved if an administrator edits the type afterward, renames a field, or adds a new one? A form that stayed live linked to its type definition would be dangerous. Edit a field's label next year and every incident report filed last year would silently reread differently. For records that might end up in an after-action report or a legal record, that's not acceptable. So TicketsCAD freezes a snapshot of the type's field list into the form the moment you first save it. That saved form keeps rendering with the exact fields it was created with forever, even if the type definition changes later or the type is archived entirely. Nothing you've already filled out on paper can silently reshape underneath you. One more type, quickly, to show the org-scoped side of that permission split. Shelter intake, and this time, instead of leaving scope as install wide, I'll pick a single organization from the dropdown. Save, and the list shows exactly which organization this type belongs to. A member of any other organization on this install won't see shelter intake on their ICS Forms hub at all, and their own API requests can't read or edit it even if they knew its internal ID. That boundary is the same server-side check every custom type request runs through, not a UI convenience that a direct API call could route around. Let's prove it. Back in the type editor, I'll add one more field to rehab check-in, allergies, and save. Now I'll reopen the rehab form saved a few minutes ago before that edit. Notice what's not here, no allergies field. This form is frozen exactly as it was when it was first saved, even though the type it was built from has already moved on. But starting a brand any rehab check-in shows the current shape of the type, allergies included. Old forms stay exactly as recorded, new forms pick up whatever the type looks like right now. That's the whole mechanism, and it needs no attention from a dispatcher filling the form out. It's automatic every time. When a form type has run its course, maybe your agency retires it after a season, archive it from this list rather than deleting it outright. Archiving takes the type off the hub, so nobody can start a new one by accident, but every form already filled out with it stays exactly where it was, fully readable, fully printable. Archiving is reversible, nothing about the underlying data ever gets deleted automatically. And restore brings it right back to active, ready to use again, with every past form still intact the whole time. A few practical tips before you build your own. Pick a slug you'll be comfortable with a year from now. It can't change once forms exist against it. Start with fewer fields than you think you need. It's always easy to add one later, and every existing form keeps working unchanged. And use the description field generously. It's the only hint a dispatcher gets about when to reach for this form instead of a built-in one. Everything shown here, the RBAC boundary, the numeric caps, the snapshot freeze, the duplicate slug guard, archiving and restoring, is backed by an automated regression suite covering thousands of assertions across the whole application, run on every change before it ships. To recap, settings, ICS forms, is where an administrator builds a custom type, title, description, scope, and a field list built from text, number, select, checkbox, textarea, a section header, and repeating tables, each with a sensible cap so one form can't spiral out of control. A super admin can make a type available install-wide, and org admin can only scope one to their own organization, enforced on the server either way. And an optional restrict to permission gate keeps a sensitive form visible only to the people who should see it. Once saved, it shows up on the ICS Forms hub right alongside the built-in 9, gets filled out and saved the same way, prints the same way, and every form you save is frozen to the field list it was created with. So editing or even archiving the type later never rewrites history underneath a form that's already on the record. Next time your agency needs a form ICS never thought of, you don't need a developer. You need 5 minutes in settings,